Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. Keith, welcome to the show. Game preview time. Seahawks at Vikings. What do you got, man?
Oh, man, I felt really good about this game coming up after week one and about halftime of week two, but I feel less good about it now, having watched the Seahawks just completely forget to show up for the second half against the Titans. And, you know, hopefully that it's one bad half. They've played three good halves and one bad half, and hopefully that's all it is, and they come out and play well. But
yeah, well, Twitter's certainly melted down. I mean, there's a lot of meltdown going on out there. A lot of unsure, you get this early in the season and you haven't had a real chance to build your identity yet as a team. And so all fans really know is the last time you were on the field. And it wasn't a great feeling, and so Twitter melted down a little bit. It's going to happen, especially Seahawks Twitter. Everyone's really passionate. I get that. I don't think that there's that much panic, at least coming from a guy like me who's followed the team since the very beginning. You've seen this kind of happen over and over. And, certain times in certain years, you're going to have games that just don't turn out the way that you want them. For me personally, you've got a non-conference game, and B, it's early in the season. They can learn from this. Hopefully they do. Pete Carroll's got them, wrangled up and teaching lessons all over the place, including the penalty type stuff. Yeah. Some of the issues they're having on the defense, and then
just a lot of discipline problems last week.
Seemingly,
both in their responsibilities and like gap discipline and staying, doing their job and not trying to do too much, but also, like the taunting penalty and the penalty out of bounds. And, 10 penalties for 100 yards. They get 100 yards.
And some of those were really impactful.
Yeah. And some of those were, especially like the taunting penalty on DJ Reed. That was, they were getting off the field and that kept the drive alive. And that kind of stuff, there's not enough room for those kind of errors in the NFL. The teams are too close. So, hopefully all that stuff's cleaned up and we don't have to worry about it going forward. But I will say that call on DJ Reed has started a very interesting debate, not just among Seahawks fans, but just among everyone who's near the NFL about what this rule is about, and
what it's trying to accomplish,
who
it's hurting. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. For me, that call was really borderline. Whether you're a Seahawks fan or whether you're a 49ers fan or whatever, that call would have been iffy in any situation, and probably not at all called last year. So The only reason it's called this year, and you can see that flag flying in from 20 yards away, that the official closest to the play didn't throw that. The official in the middle of the field threw that from, where the line of scrimmage was. And I just thought that it was just the wrong call for the wrong reasons at the wrong time. You're impacting a game at that point. You're giving away 15 yards to an offense that's marching down the field. That's, you can see the momentum kind of flipping a little bit in this game. And it really had an impact. And so I don't know. It just didn't feel right. It didn't look right at the time. He wasn't standing over the guy, mocking him, doing anything at all that would be considered bullying behavior or anything like that. He was just literally at a moment of self-expression where he was thrilled to make a play. And there's a difference there. And if a referee can't make that judgment, then don't put the referees in that spot to make judgments.
Yeah, and that's kind of the end of it. It's really football is a really emotional game, especially for defenders, right? Their job is to stop the other team, and it's a big deal when they do it, especially when you're a defensive back in today's NFL with the way the rules have shifted, and playing cornerback is essentially impossible. And for him to go up and make that play, yeah, it's emotional. He's flexing. You're really into it, and I love that. And there's no reason to call that. Like you cannot take that emotion out of the game. And you don't want to. You want to get the fans involved. You want to have the stadium be rocking because players are showing emotion and it's getting the fans going. And I am at a loss as to why the NFL, they did this a few years ago and then they totally backed off on it, and the NFL went back to being fun. And now they're back to this again. It's like,
yeah, the NFL Players Association came out with a tweet the other day where they said, we don't agree with this rule. We have a spot at the table with regards to the rules committee, but it's in name only. We've got one player representative sitting at a table with 12 representatives that are appointed by the NFL commissioner. And whatever the NFL commissioner wants is what the NFL commissioner gets as far as the rules. Mm-hmm. And if he's listening, hey, dude, how's it going? Bad rule, bring it back a little bit. Let the players have a little bit of fun. Let them have emotion. Let the defense win a few things once in a while. And, against dominant offenses, when defenders make big plays, this is where the emotion comes out in the game. And if you're trying to curtail emotion, I'm sorry, but that's just part of the game. It just really is. And don't take that away from everyone. So anyway.
Yeah. So I was going to say on this, I was listening to Dan Patrick, and he had Jeff Saturday, who's the center, most notably for all the years when Peyton Manning was with the Colts on there. And he was talking about that rule and that call. And he was saying, those kind of things are typically or what defenders do, right? Because as an offensive player, there's more about being a technician, and it's about, doing your job, and defenders play with all this energy because you have to. It's just part of what they do. And he's like, and I'm an offensive player, and I think this is the worst rule in sports. So he was really straight up saying, this is a rule that's not aimed at me. I still hate it. And to me, that was really telling. That I have this belief that the NFL is going to get this right, and you're going to see a lot. The enforcement of it is going to go down as the season goes along.
So a couple things right off the top, now that it's 7 minutes into the show. Let's talk about a couple of housekeeping things first. Just want to mention, again, we've said this before, we're part of the Pigskin Podcast Network, and that's going to help us stay on the air, give us a little bit of money to keep things going, make sure the graphics are good, make sure we've got good things to talk about and a place to call home into the near future, because it's not free to do what we've done. And we've remained independent, Keith, for 4.5 years of our existence. And now we've have a little bit of an agreement to kind of help us out. And part of that is to have sponsorship. And one of our sponsors, our main sponsor, is DraftKings. DraftKings is currently running a promotion to help us kick off the ground. And if you go to the DraftKings website and you enter code TPPN, you can spend $1 and get $150 credit on your first bet, as long as you put a $5 deposit, I think, down. I'm not necessarily required to say that, but that's my understanding of exactly what that is. And so you
cool.
can.
Cool promo. I say it's cool promo. DraftKings is, daily fantasy, sort of weekly fantasy, really, in the NFL. But you come in, you draft a new team each week, and see how good you do. There's money to be won if you know what you're doing, and if you don't, then it's fun.
You can still win. and I will say too, and when we do the audio portion of our show, we'll have an ad read in the middle of the show. On our video, we're not doing that, but there are states where you can legally do this, and then there are other states where you cannot, and they still have some promos and giveaways and so forth for everyone on there. So just wanted to mention that. The other stuff is that we signed a tight end to the practice squad, Jace Sternberg, former third-round pick from the Green Bay Packers, number 75 overall in the 2019 draft, had a great senior year in college at Texas A&M, caught a ton of balls, spent his first year on injured reserve and out, not playing at all, and then was just released yesterday by Green Bay. I don't know if he passed through wires and we made a wire claim, or he just cleared waivers and ended up on our practice squad, which is more likely, I think. And so he's out there. That's great news. Ethan Posick is still on. Ethan Posick is still on injured reserve for another game or two, which means we're going to see more Kyle Fuller out there, the lowest graded offensive player on the Seattle's offense last week, is going to remain there for at least another week. I don't really understand that at all, but it is what it is. And
part of it is they're just lacking another alternative right now. Shepley is out. He's the backup, and he was dressed and he played special teams, but he's only been on the team for a couple of weeks, and I don't think they're comfortable with him in terms of, getting the line calls and the playbook and all that stuff, right? Even though he's physically a superior player, but he doesn't know the stuff as well at this point. So that's one of the things Pete Carroll came out and said about Fuller, is that he's doing the mental parts right. And that's why they're sticking with him, but he's not doing the physical parts right, because he just doesn't have the functional strength, and he's just not that talented of a player, but he's smart. He's football smart. So they're hoping he can improve, but obviously Bill and I have our doubts.
Yeah. Well, he'll face Dalvin Tomlinson this week, so we'll see. So is there any other injury concerns? So I think DK Metcalf's going to be okay. I'm not sure exactly where D. Eskridge is in his concussion protocol. I haven't heard anything as of this moment.
Yeah.
And then I think everyone else is doing pretty good. So we should be set. Let's talk about this game. Seahawks are on the road against the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota comes in 0-2. They lost, for them, a heartbreaking loss to the Arizona Cardinals on a missed last-second field goal from 19 yards out. So it would have been a 35-yard field goal, something like that.
What is it about the Vikings and
I
losing
know.
on last-second field goals?
Well, I'm here for it.
Missed field goals.
Yeah, well, I'm here for it because it certainly helps us. They're in the NFC, and I'll take any help we can get. But so they'll come in motivated. I watched quite a bit. I watched about 13 minutes of highlights of that game, and quite frankly, Minnesota looked pretty good for a good portion of that game, similar to what Seattle did to the Titans in the first half. They were able to be toe-to-toe with Arizona. In fact, they were up early, and Arizona kind of came back and then held that lead. Arizona looked good too. Kyler Murray looked great. So it kind of gave me some hope a little bit for our offense in this game. But so you're going to deal with Kirk Cousins at quarterback. Kirk Cousins actually looked pretty decent in this game. Dalvin Cook looked like a gasher, like a guy that could really, if Seattle wasn't a great run-stopping team, which now I'm questioning.
Until the second half of last week's game, Seattle was a great run-stopping team.
And then they got really undisciplined, but I want to see that discipline before I crown them again.
Yep.
Justin Jefferson, great little wide receiver. Adam Thielen, a guy that's going to catch some stuff over the middle. Some other familiar names: Patrick Peterson at corner, Everson Griffin, and Daniel Hunter. Boy, did he have a game. I'll get into that in a little bit. Sheldon Richardson's there. A couple other guys: Xavier Woods, Dalvin Tomlinson at defensive tackle. What do you want to see? So let's talk about what we want to see in this game. Like, if you're Seattle's offense, based on what happened this last game, what would you like to see in this game to know that we did correct some things?
Well, I want to see them actually convert some more third downs.
That's huge.
And part of that is getting them set up to in 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2 and not, throwing it 3rd and 8. That would help quite a bit. So that involves, getting the running game going. And they just
Got to be careful with that.
They were not as effective running the ball last week. And I know a lot of that's the front four of the Titans was really good, and the offensive line for Seattle had a rough day. But I want to see them be more effective running the ball. That doesn't mean they have to run the ball a lot. They just need to be more effective at it so that it keeps.
Well, I think you said it. I think the key that you increase the running game and the efficiency and the effectiveness is you convert those third downs. The first game we converted 44% of our first down. Last year we were at 38.4. This was exactly in line with what Pete Carroll talked about in the offseason about getting more efficient and getting better at converting third downs. By doing that, you're giving more opportunity to Ross to throw the ball and Chris Carson to run the ball. And that's what I think Pete Carroll really is talking about when he talks about running more effectively and so forth. That's kind of what, but second week they regressed down to 33.3% conversion rate.
Yeah.
That's not where they want to be. That's way below even last year.
No. And the offensive line really struggled last week, especially in the second half. I mean, Wilson was under pressure a lot. He had offensive linemen ended up on the ground and so the defensive linemen are coming in where they shouldn't be. And I mean, they almost gave up a safety, there in overtime, and it just looked really bad throughout most of the game. They really need to clean that up. And this is not an easy front to clean that up with, right? Sheldon Richardson and company, they're going to make it real tough on Seattle. But it really comes down to, I mean, Damian Lewis had 9 penalties a year ago. I think he's already at 2 or 3 this year. He needs to clean it up. Fuller needs to, become a different person. So that way he's, but the rest of the line, I mean, it's supposed to not be this massive weakness that it has been in the past. And it was definitely the thing that hurt the offense the most.
Well, I tell you what, in the first half, I thought they did pretty doggone good, and what I'd like to see is a continued emphasis on trying to figure out how to get the tight ends involved in this offense, how to get DK Metcalf involved in the offense that has more routes that get him wide open in space. Lockett has just had an amazing start to the year. Let's see what we can do about getting DK and to have a guy like Estridge back would be an amazing add to this offense too. I really hope that he's able to heal up and be able to contribute, because that really does do quite a bit to increase the opportunities for the wide receivers to help Wilson out.
Well, and on the the fly sweeps and stuff, Eskridge is a bigger a bigger threat than Freddie Swain on that kind of stuff. He's just quicker and faster and more explosive. But I mean, it would be nice to have that. But you started with the thing that is most important. They've got to get the tight ends involved and go back to using the middle of the field, which they did in week 1 and they completely went away from in week 2. Like, where'd the tight ends go? Yeah.
Well, yes. So I think that's going to be one of the keys. And if you take a look at the Arizona game, the other thing, 2 things that Arizona did really well was they got their receivers in open space, and Kyler Murray was able to move the pocket. And if they did get to Kyler Murray was able to escape that and make them pay. So I anticipate seeing a similar game from Russell Wilson and Seattle's offense that Arizona used against them. Kyler Murray ended up with, let me see, I thought I wrote it down, but he ended up with close to 400 yards. Yeah, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, 11 yards per attempt. And he did that by moving that pocket around a little bit. And I think Seattle would benefit from that. The other thing that I think that we could really do is, you mentioned getting Chris Carson going. And I totally agree. And in the last 9 games, the defense of the Minnesota Vikings has allowed 15 touchdowns to running backs. And so that's a decent opportunity, I think, that needs to be exploited by Seattle. And Minnesota's never been a team that plays well from behind because they have Kirk Cousins. And so I think that getting a lead, up front would be good, and then continue to step on the gas. Don't do what we did against the Titans. Don't relax a little bit. Don't get cute. Try to go methodically down the field. Take those shots when you can. I think those shots will be there against this defense. I really do. But in order for that to happen, you're going to have to play underneath and within the offense for a little while. I think if there's one thing that I'm a little concerned about early on in the season with the Shane Waldron, Russell Wilson dynamic, is Russell Wilson kind of not doing what that offense is really designed to do. And that's taking what the defense gives you on any given play instead of trying to press things. And so I'm interested to find out if that kind of marries up a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the situations in the Tennessee game, right? 3rd and 1, and you end up with a fade down the sideline. Or you could take the easy first down and then, come back to that play later. I mean, I get that he had Metcalf one-on-one on the outside, and
at that point, you've got a 3rd and 1. Let's trust Chris Carson a couple of times a game in that scenario.
Or have Metcalf out there and make it look like you're going to go there, and then throw a slant underneath and get the first down.
If you have D. Eskridge in, that's a perfect opportunity for Eskridge. That's a perfect opportunity for Disley or Everett, to take advantage of single man coverage, especially against a slower linebacker or a safety that's undersized. Let's go take advantage of those things. And Russell Wilson should be thinking about that. I'm sure that he is, but also, on those plays, if you see DK in single coverage, you see Tyler Lockett in single coverage, you're going to trust that matchup 9 times out of 10. So I don't want to completely take that away, but I think Russ has really lived and died by that decision over the last, say, 10 games into last year.
But part of it is you have to know your game situation. I'll take that one-on-one with DK on the outside almost all the time, but you're in a situation where you need a first down.
Yeah.
You don't need the big play. You need a first down. You need to keep your defense off the field. You got to get another first down, run some clock down because you're trying to protect a lead, and you're trying to give your defense a break. Know the game situation and take the first down instead of going for the big play. There's times to go for the big play. That wasn't it.
And I point to the yards after catch kind of theory that Shane Waldron brings into this offense. We haven't seen that yet. And we've been at this for 2 games, and we've yet to really seen an offensive player really have cleared out a space, in a zone type scheme. And it could be scheme oriented. I honestly, I don't know for sure, but it seems like we should be seeing more receivers operate in open space to create yards after catch. And it just seems like we're kind of doing the same thing we did last year.
Yeah. If you go and you look at the receivers and the yards after catch stats and all of that, Seattle's actually done pretty well, especially compared to last year where they had nothing. But as far as individual, yards after catch, they're pretty good on that. But a lot of it came from Freddie Swain when he caught that ball when he was wide open and there was no one between him and the goal line, and a couple of Tyler Lockett ones where he caught the ball and was able to just coast to the last 30 yards into the end zone. So those are yards after catch and they're there, but there aren't the schemed yards after catch that we talked about and that the team talked about, where you're getting a guy in space, 8 yards down the field, where he can turn up field and make somebody miss and add that to it. It's much more similar to what we saw in the past, where guys are catching the ball and then stepping out of bounds, or catching the ball and the tackle being made right away, and there isn't that extra space that we were hoping that they were to find. So,
couple other things really quick. Pass blocking in this game, I think, is going to be really important to create time for Russell Wilson to take shots, because I think those shots are going to be here. in this game. They were for Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray moved around in the pocket, created some extra time, and he was able to throw the ball downfield. Like I said, 11 plus yards per attempt in his game. I look for that from Russell Wilson in this game too. I know that we've just talked about not always trying to take those long shots, but they're going to be there in this game. The other thing to pay attention to is Tennessee had 3 sacks and 6 quarterback hits last week. Danielle Hunter alone had 7 tackles, 3 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and 3 quarterback hits. They need to pay attention to Hunter and know where he's at all the time. Now, luckily for us, Dwayne Brown's matched up on his side most of the time, but that remains to be seen how well Damian Lewis does to some stunts on the inside, featuring Hunter as well. So something to watch. How about Seattle on defense, Keith? What do we need to do to stop the Minnesota Vikings?
Well, I mean, you got to look at the fact that, Cousins is not the mobile quarterback. You're not playing against Kyler Murray. You're playing against a pocket guy who you can get after. And the defensive line has to play better than they did last week. They have to be
disciplined, because Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings have a great screen game. I wish KJ Wright was here, because he really was the counter to that. But they run probably 7 or 8 screens a game because of their offensive line. I think they do get pressure, and some of those those overly aggressive defensive fronts can sometimes hurt you in certain situations, and they do know how to make you pay. That's why Kirk Cousins had 122 overall quarterback rating last week against Arizona, because he ended up throwing like 6 or 7 screens.
Yeah. And so that is part of it. And so it really comes down to, they have to be careful with, the running game, because Minnesota's averaging 5 yards per run. That's really going to challenge Seattle.
Yeah.
And if the Seahawks
and last week, Dalvin Cook had 6.0 average.
Yeah. And so if Cook and company are averaging, 5 yards a run, what that's going to do is that's going to have Seattle come out in those bear fronts again with their 3 defensive tackles all on the field, and essentially playing with 5 defensive linemen, which was great in week 1. It worked fantastic to shut down the running game, but it also makes it harder for you to get pressure on the quarterback. And if you let Kirk Cousins stand back there without any pressure and just wait for his guys to get open, he'll make your life really difficult. So
he does. He's an accurate passer, capable guy, and we've never said that he wasn't capable. He's one of those quarterbacks. It's not like a Jimmy Garoppolo situation. Kirk Cousins is better than Jimmy Garoppolo on almost every level.
Yes.
But he's not an elite level. We talked about that last week when we rattled off 4 or 5 quarterback names that can go out and win games at the end of games when the game's on the line. Kirk Cousins is probably not that guy. Kirk Cousins, you want to definitely go into the 4th quarter with a lead with Kirk Cousins, and you want to try to maintain that lead to the end of the game. And we saw what their kicker did at the end of the game. You don't want to put it in the kicker's hands at the end of the game. You don't want to depend on Kirk Cousins marching down the field on the last drive. But other than that, and even sometimes he's successful at that, but other than that, against good defenses, as long as you can contain the run game and force Kirk Cousins to be the guy that beats you, you can usually beat the Minnesota Vikings. And that's been proven out over, quite a few different seasons now.
Yeah. I mean, he's not a bad quarterback. And I don't want people to listen to this and have me thinking that you and I are saying like, oh, he's a terrible quarterback, but he's not a star quarterback. He's not a guy that's going to come in and, dominate you and just wow you with his plays. He's not overly athletic. He doesn't have a great arm, but he is accurate and he does get the ball out quickly. So get some pressure on him and he'll throw some picks and stuff. But if you let him sit back there unpressured, he will make you pay for it. And I really think that that's what they've got to do. They've got to do a good job of stopping the run, because this team is averaging 5 yards per run.
Dalvin Cook can gash you. He really can.
He really can. He's a fantastic player. And
probably the second best running back in the NFL or in the top 5 conversation.
He's definitely in the top 5. He's not Derrick Henry.
No.
He's not a
Thank
240-pound guy that runs over defensive linemen. He's not that, which is we're very happy about. But he still is really good and will gash you. So they need to force 3rd and long by stopping the running game. And then they need to get after Kirk Cousins and get pressure. They've got to get home. Because if you don't, it's going to be a long game.
All right. So prediction time, Keith. I'll go first. You went first last week. Of course, you were the only one on when you made the prediction that you weren't quite sure if I was going to come back. I think this is going to be a bigger scoring game. The average, I think I wrote this down somewhere in my notes. Let me see if I can find that really quick. I think the average score in the last 2 games by Minnesota is the opponent scoring, 31 points a game, and Minnesota scoring about 26. And so I think that's going to continue in this. I think Seattle gets back on track offensively and kind of stays there, opens it up a little bit. So I'm looking at like 37 for the Seahawks. And I still think there's ways that Minnesota can beat you and score points. I really do think that they're a pretty competent offense, maybe even a top 10 offense. And so I'm going to give them a little credit, and I'm going to go 27. So 37-27 Seahawks on the road.
That's an interesting take on this because it's almost identical to mine. In that when I came up with my prediction on this, I had 34-27, 7-point victory by Seattle. I expect this to be a game with some points. The Vikings have a pretty good defense, but they've also got a vulnerable defense in some ways. And so there's some talent there, but there's weaknesses there as well. And I think that Seattle can take advantage of that. And also, honestly, until I see it again, I'm not going to say the Seahawks have a great defense because they looked anything but against the Titans last week.
Yeah, well, and they surrendered 532 yards against the Titans. Now, I don't think they're going to surrender 532, but they could surrender 422. And I would like them to be better than that. I would love to come out of this game having given up just 350 yards and 17 points. I just don't see it in this game. I want to see them get on track. I want to see some good signs that I can take out of this game into the next game and build on that and so on and so forth. But yeah, you're right. Until we see it, I want them to win. They need to win. This is a game that's on the schedule that I have them winning. And in order for them to be a playoff team that thinks that they can get past the second round in the playoffs, they need to have wins like this. And so that's what I'm looking at. All right, Keith, let's get out of here this week. Follow Keith on Twitter at MyersNFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. SeahawksPlaybook.com has all of everything. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube, and subscribe to both those. Make sure you get all 3 shows each week into your feed so you don't have to go looking for them each time. So until next time, go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.